set? All set? All right, we'll call the March 3rd meeting of the Hastings Planning Commission to order. We'll begin with roll call. Bolthouse.
Here.
Darling.
Here.
Foster.
Here.
Like.
Here.
Mattson.
Here.
McLean. Moyer Kale. Tassava.
Here.
Our student representative, Ansorge.
Here.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Okay. Why don't you get me a little dialed in?
And sword.
And, okay. And Hatfield here. First of all, I'd just like to apologize to everyone for the fact that I was not here last month, and I want to thank Nicole for filling in for me. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all stand, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, you've received our meeting packet, including the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, changes proposed for the agenda?
I'll move approval. Support.
We have a motion and support to approve the agenda as distributed. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. In that packet, you've also received the minutes from the February 3rd meeting. Any corrections?
Move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Support.
We have a motion and support to approve the minutes of the February 3rd meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. We have no information items. We do have one public hearing tonight. That's a public hearing to consider amending Chapter 90, Section 90-883, Sub B, Sub 4, to increase driveway width at the property lines from 20 to 24 feet. Dan, you want to introduce this, and then we'll call the meeting to order, public hearing to order.
Yeah, so as some of you recall, members that were on the Planning Commission a couple of years ago, the Zoning Board of Appeals had had a variance request come across their board, and it dealt with the driveway width at the property line. In the case that came before them, the garage was built considerably closer to the property line than most garages or driveways were, hence the reason for the variance. So the Zoning Board of Appeals did look at information that the applicant had provided regarding the maximum driveway width at the property line. Currently, our ordinance states a 12-foot minimum with a 20-foot maximum. The applicant did provide more than several instances in the immediate neighborhood where the driveway width at the property line exceeded the 20 feet. So the Zoning Board of Appeals kind of referred this on to staff for further discussion by the Planning Commission. Planning Commission did take it up briefly a couple of years ago, then it just kind of fizzled out. We figured this would be a perfect time to reintroduce that. You have the staff memo that Rebecca has provided, and really the information or the kind of the factual basis for the consideration of increasing the maximum driveway width at the property line from 20 feet to 24 feet. This public hearing was properly noticed. I received no communication from the public whatsoever regarding this text amendment, so obviously it was not a hot button topic with the public. So with that, I'd be able to entertain any questions, or Rebecca is available too.
Rebecca, anything you'd like to add at this point?
No, I have nothing.
Okay. And Dan will defer questions until after the public comment period. So at this point, I will open the public hearing to consider amending Chapter 90, Section 90-883, Sub B, Sub 4, to increase driveway width of the property line from 20 to 24 feet. Anybody present that would like to speak to that? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Are there any commission members that have any questions for either Dan or Rebecca? If not, what's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion, we approve changing it to 24 feet and recommend to City Council for its approval.
Support.
All right, we have a motion and support to recommend to City Council an amendment to Chapter 90, Section 90-883, Sub B, Sub 4, to increase driveway width of the property lines from 20 to 24 feet. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. All right, approved, and we'll forward that to City Council with a recommendation to approve. We have 3 items of new business. First of all is an unofficial site plan review. Good evening. Let the record show that Moyer Kale has joined the meeting. Dan, you want to introduce the site plan review for Julie?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Julie Fox contacted me last week regarding inquiring about if it's possible to come in front of the Planning Commission just for some informal discussion for site plans, and I told her yes. I've cited the ordinance in your packet that allows for unofficial site plan review by the Planning Commission. And again, that ordinance is in your packet. In a nutshell, basically says the Planning Commission can review unofficially any information that an applicant would so provide. It's just that the Planning Commission can't render any decisions, yes or no, regarding that. So what Julie's going to discuss tonight is a vacant piece of property on, I think it's North Washington Street. It's zoned B4, Business 4. Julie also owns the building contiguous to the south that borders on Apple Street. So what she's going to be discussing with you is the possibility of converting that vacant space into off-street parking. So.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Julie, welcome. You're hiding from me back there.
I like to hide.
You want to give us a quick overview on what you're proposing, please?
Yeah. And I just kind of wanted to get a feel and some feedback, I think, really from the committee. I do own the piece of property at 210 North Michigan. It is right next to 505 West Apple. If you guys aren't super familiar with that, that's the building that Mark Engler used to own on Apple Street. And the vacant lot, I would love to use 26 days out of the year, providing that it doesn't rain or there's not flooding, for overflow parking for you Renham Canoe. And I know as it stands now, what I'd have to do in order to do that is to combine the 2 properties. But I wanted to get a feel for, with minimal usage like that, is there any wiggle room in not having to asphalt or put cement on that entire lot? The reason I'm asking is, number 1, obviously expense. Number 2 is that it's a really nice green space, and it would be used so minimally for parking. It would be used June, July, and August, probably only on Saturdays and Sundays. So that's 26 days a year, providing it's not flooding or providing it's not raining, because obviously we have no customers when it's raining. So 93% of the year, we wouldn't even be using the property for that. About 7% of the year we would. And I didn't know if there was any wiggle room for that. It's not like, you know, I almost feel like if I blacktopped it, there would be a lot more parking in there than it would invite that on a nonstop basis, whether they are our customers or not. So before I went forward, I just kind of wanted to get a feel, is this very black and white? Is there any gray area? I just kind of wanted to get an idea of what I was dealing with. Does that make any sense?
Fair question. There is a parking lot that fronts on Apple that's part of the other parcel. Would you tie the two parking lots together?
No. No. They would remain if I would have to tie the two properties together in order to park there. Is my understanding right, Dan? I would have to combine the two properties?
Not necessarily. If the use of the building on Apple Street or wherever changed to a use that would require more parking, you could actually use that space to that vacant parcel to conform to whatever standards or parking lot requirements that would be required of that. So if it was a bakery or an ice cream shop, just to throw those examples out, that would increase the need for more off-street parking, you could use that because that lot is within 300 feet, obviously, of that building.
Got it, got it. I don't anticipate, well, the building that Mark used to have right now, the outside of it looks the same, it's very ugly. The inside, everything but the front where he was, has been completely gutted, and it's a state-of-the-art bakery. It's beautiful. And we bake for the curly cone. Surprisingly, we sell a lot of baked goods out there. Eventually, I would like to have where people could pull up, walk in, buy baked goods, maybe some ice cream, you know, something very small. But I don't anticipate that happening for a bit, and I definitely wouldn't think that I would have a lot of overflow parking for that. I think I would probably have plenty. I'm looking for, you know, when the canoe livery went on a 100-degree day on a Saturday, you know, we are pressed. And that lot would be perfect. Like I said, it wouldn't be an everyday thing. It would be, you know, something that actually would, under perfect conditions, we would use 7% of the year. But I didn't know if there was any wiggle room. If it has to be blacktopped, I kind of just wanted to know and understand that so that when I'm thinking about what my options are, I know what I'm dealing with.
Okay. Well, as Dan said in introducing this, we cannot make decisions tonight, but we can at least give you comments. So, thoughts?
Well, there's a couple things. Accessibility, if people are parking there and have some sort of disability, not having it paved could be an issue. And also with the paving, that kind of controls a drainage off that property. So it gives you the ability to drain it into a specific area.
Well, the requirements are in the ordinance, so we can't just change what's in there as far as, you know, on a site plan to site plan basis. So we're bound to whatever those requirements are in a lot of ways. So I don't know, Becky, I don't think there's anything about how often a parking lot's used. It's just about the zoning district.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of issues at play here, which I would agree, none of which are going to be under the control of the Planning Commission. So the way your ordinance reads is that for commercial properties or for non-residential use, off-site parking is only allowed in areas within 300 feet of that use. So unless, and I understand the livery is also in the B4, so I think it would be considered a non-residential use. So only if this lot were within 300 feet of the livery would it be able to be used for frequent or infrequent parking related to the livery, unless a variance were received. Now, I think you could call that a dimensional variance instead of a use variance, because the standard is it has to be within 300 feet, so I can see where the relief could be, well, we'll allow it however many feet that is. But number one, that is definitely a ZBA action. Number two, you're absolutely correct. The ordinance requires, in addition to the the on-site parking standard, you have parking lot design standards that would apply that you don't have the ability to deviate from. But I think that would again go before the ZBA, right? To say, we want to park on this lot, it exceeds 300 feet, and here are the design standards that we are seeking relief from. And then those would be ZBA issues. Now, if the ZBA were to be inclined to grant those, then you would be free to then proceed with your view of the site plan and the parking lot layout and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments?
The only issue, and I appreciate everything you do, Julie. You bring a lot of people to town. You know, if somebody parks on their lawn, doesn't matter if they park there once or they park there all the time, they're in violation. I would like to see that, because I know down the road, and I don't know what your plan is in the next 3 or 4 years, but I know you're probably going to do something else with that building. You're going to probably put a drive-through ice cream store or something in there.
I'm old, I don't want any more projects.
Well, what I'm saying though is I think, you know, if we're making the general public in Hastings park on a hard surface, I think that needs to be hard surface, and the ordinance does say that, but,
It's been a little bit of a contentious issue on the residential side,
Yep.
hasn't it?
Yes.
Requirement.
All right, well, you've answered my question.
Okay, just one more question for you. What kind of fencing are you anticipating putting around that?
Well, none if we can't park there. I'll just leave it as is, and then obviously.
Well, that's, I'm assuming, yeah, my question relates to if you use it for parking.
Whatever fencing the city would desire. Just whatever was required, whatever you wanted. I mean, we bring, on a busy Saturday, probably 1,500 people to Hastings. And we are just pressed. You know, I've acquired 4 pieces of property within the last, 5 years. And, so we make do, but it's hard. We're pressed. And, you can tell people we're full, there's no more room at the inn, and they still show up. So, you got to do something with those people. So I'm just looking for options.
Okay?
Thank you, guys.
Keep in touch with staff, and we wish you luck with the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item B, which is to, again, review the preliminary planned unit development plan for the Bachman Road Fields property at 900 Bachman Road. So, Dan?
Yes, thank you. So, correct me, Green Valley, correct? Green Development, okay. I was trying to do it from memory, and that's always a poor choice for me, so. Green Development is in front of you tonight for a preliminary planned unit development plan review for property located up on Bachman Road. Approximately 40 acres would be on the western side of Bachman Road, north of Woodlawn Avenue. Their plans, as you remember, they were here in January, I believe, for a site condo plan review using components of the open space neighborhood. That was reviewed by the Planning Commission at that time. The applicant now has resubmitted with the intention of using planned unit development rather than open space neighborhood aspects. These properties would still be, or the parcels would still be developed as site condo projects, so there would be a parallel path between this and the planned unit development aspect of the project. So you do have those site plans in front of you. As a word of note, a staff review by Rebecca Harvey was sent to you on Friday. That has been corrected, and you each have copies of the new staff report in front of you. There were just some omissions and some a little bit of editing that needed to take place. So you do have staff report in there. I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, Rebecca's, I know, we're prepared to answer questions also.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Rebecca, you want to?
Sure. Yes, so you do have the staff report, which essentially is a revised staff report from the last time you saw it, which was an open space project. So it is very similar in its design, but the applicant is using a different provision, a development provision, under which to propose this project. So there is a little bit of the information in the report that is going to be different. So let me just hit the highlights for you. So instead of an open space project, this is being proposed as a planned unit development. The key difference in those two approaches is the initial project design approach, the open space approach, really had a focus on not so much how much open space is preserved in the design, but really how it's organized and its function and its layout and that sort of thing. And the planned unit development, although it has similar development elements to it, a PUD does not have a focus on open space. It requires open space, but because that is not the premier reason for the development proposal, there's not a lot of design focus on that open space. So I think in this switch, the applicant went back in, took that design that you looked at last month, and made some modifications to it, but really decided that to present this to you more as a PUD so that some of the open space design elements would not be a problem for the proposal. Now, this is a planned unit development, and as such, it requires a preliminary plan review by you, but your preliminary plan review action responsibilities essentially is to review it and to provide comment to the applicant, and then they come back with the final plan. So you're not really moving anything along on this. Now, the site, they are proposing the land division element of this to be as a site condominium. And your review process for that is that you recommend it and you move it along to the City Commission, but you'll do that at such time as you do the final plan review. So really your focus tonight is going to be on providing feedback to the applicant so that they can finalize the plans for actual action by you. Another couple of highlights has to do with that this is really guided by, from a design perspective, they were guided by the restrictions that are in the R1A district and in the PUD provision itself. So that's the way the report is set up, and you'll see two sets of standards. Let me just highlight for you that in the R1A district, essentially that's what the PUD says. Here's going to be the dimensional requirements for the PUD. And you'll notice in the table on page 3 that those items in bold represent where the proposed layout of the lots is not in compliance with the R1A district standards, which are the standards that apply. So essentially, they're proposing smaller lots than required. They're proposing lot widths that are less than required, and they are proposing building setbacks that are slightly reduced from what is required. Those are all under a PUD. The Planning Commission has the ability to modify those and accept reduced proposals. So that's going to be one of the points of your discussion tonight, is whether or not you're going to find that acceptable. Because if you don't, then the applicant will need to go back and adjust his lot sizes, obviously that's going to change the number of lots that the development will hold. So that's going to be one of your conversation points. The reason that the planned unit development allows the Planning Commission to deviate in this respect is because it is being proposed to you in its entirety, and it gives you flexibility in design. And so essentially what the ordinance says is that if you feel that the objectives of the planned unit development approach are met in every other respect, then you are in a position of accepting modified lot sizes and lot widths and setbacks. So your discussion is going to be, do we think that this design meets the objectives of the PUD? And if we do, then you're probably going to find that those reduced standards are acceptable. With respect to some other key elements which are going to play a factor in that first conversation is your PUD ordinance does establish a density standard, and it does establish an open space standard, both of which this proposal meets. So the density, they are proposing a density less than what is allowed. In addition to that, they are proposing a percentage of open space slightly greater than what you require. So I think, obviously those are going to be factors you would consider in determining whether or not you think any kind of reduction in lot sizes is going to be acceptable, density and open space. Lastly, I would say in your PUD design considerations, that's where you're going to find, in the rest of the ordinance, you'll see that for the most part, the R1A district standards are met with the exception of the lot sizes. And so and we've already talked about how the PUD allows you to deviate. The remaining of the bolded comments are under the PUD design considerations. And I would say that really the key on this is, in my opinion, what I was responding to was sort of the road layout. So these are going to be public streets. So as it relates to construction standards, they are going to be subject to the city's construction standards. That's not really within the Planning Commission's purview. So they have to construct them as a public street, dedicate them as a public street. So those dimensions and that kind of thing are built into those standards. What you do have some discretion on is street layout. That's part of sort of a design element of the plan, which is where the Planning Commission comes in, and you're looking at, do we like this design in terms of neighborhood design? So I would say that in addition to the lot size reductions, I would say your second element of discussion might want to focus on the street layout. In most other respects, I think the project proposal is consistent with your district standards and your PUD standards. Obviously there's some conversation on stormwater. You're going to give feedback on those, but those are things that I think are a little easier for you to consider because you can rely on your engineer to review and that kind of thing. But I do think the lot reductions and the street layout probably are some key design issues for you to talk about tonight, so you can give feedback to the applicant.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen.
Good evening, everyone. Mike West with Green Development Ventures and Alan Edwin Homes, 2186 East Center Avenue in Portage, Michigan. Also with me this evening is Dan Larabelle. He's one of our land managers in the Land Development Department, and Brian Farkas. He's our Workforce Housing Director. So they attended the meeting, and the property owner, as I think you guys are aware, is also present, Mr. Peterson. Like to thank the Commission for their consideration and thank Becky for her direction and guidance. Following that January meeting, we did sit down and meet with Becky, learn more about open space neighborhood designs. We do a lot of subdivisions with open space, but not a lot with pure open space design elements. So we did look at the open space neighborhood design. We studied it. It just didn't work for our vision for the property, for some of the standards. We just couldn't seem to get it to work into our model for what we were looking for. That left us with basically two options, a planned unit development option or just a traditional subdivision under the R1A. We do think that the subdivision is unique in some aspects that you don't get in the traditional subdivision with no open space. So what we did is we did take some of the comments that the commission provided in January, and we revised the plan with some of those revisions. So real briefly, I'll just go through it. As Dan indicated, it's about a 39-acre piece of property. We're proposing 121 single-family home sites in 4 development phases, a little over 3 units per acre, so our density is within the standards of the ordinance. What we did from the January meeting is in that central open space area, we eliminated a couple lots. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, look, I like this, got a pointer. So we eliminated a couple lots there. I think that's Street C, kind of opened that area up, not only from accessibility, but for visibility. And then along Court D, we eliminated a lot. We inserted a walking trail, similar to what we have on that western open space area, walking path with some benches in there. And I discussed the open space areas, I think, pretty detailed in January, but just to summarize, we have a total of 6.3 acres of open space that we're proposing within this development. It's about 16, a little over 16% of the site. The ordinance has a minimum of 10%. Two primary open spaces. The western area is 3.7 acres. It abuts the PUD that was approved recently or amended recently here, the Woodlawn Meadows PUD. Within that open space area, we have a recreational field that we're proposing. That's that orange shaded area up in there. We have a walking path with benches. Along that walking path, we plan on putting some kind of kid-friendly elements in there, some balancing beams and jumping pads and climbing obstacles along there. We also plan on putting like a bird feeding station, birdhouse area, and then we propose to enhance that area with some habitat enhancement. We propose some wildflower planting beds, and installation of shrubs and trees at a ratio that we can fill that in to kind of be more of a natural habitat area. Within the central open space, we're 2.6 acres now with the elimination of those 3 lots. Again, we have the mowed walking path with the benches. We're preserving 2 wetland pockets. Those are those 2 blue areas there. Those wetland pockets were delineated by Artemis Environmental last fall for us. And also within that open space area around the wetlands, we plan on to enhancing that area as well with wildflower plantings, shrubs, and trees. Other than that, we have an existing tree line that kind of shares that western property line within that open space area between us and the Woodlawn Meadows retirement community. We're planning on retaining that. There's a large oak tree right along Bachman Road, 60-inch oak. We plan on preserving that. And then, as required by ordinance, street trees are shown on there now too as well. We're proposing a street tree, 1 per lot, 2 per every corner lot. So from a walkability standpoint, it's a very walkable community. Sidewalks both sides of the roads, they all interconnect to these walking paths. So you can have both a sidewalk experience of walking along the road, and then you can also go off into these natural open space areas. Yeah, as Becky indicated, what we're really looking for is some feedback from you folks, some elements, things that you like, things that you'd like to see maybe tweaked on the plan, changed on the plan. We're here to have a nice dialogue, hopefully, and have some direction, and we can go back and finalize this plan and get it back in front of you. I did provide kind of a narrative with kind of a summary of what we believe are consistency with your PUD objectives, so we can go through those if you like. We also have just a couple questions or clarifications, I think, from Becky's report that we would request some direction into, but I don't know when the appropriate time to ask that is. Maybe as we go through and have questions, we can have some as well. So
Now's probably as good as any to raise those, because it may stimulate some additional
Sure.
discussion from us
well,
as well.
really, they're just points of clarification where I guess we're asking for. On page 4 of the staff report at the top, it's going to correspond to the bolded areas on the staff report. It talks about the walking paths, and then it talks about spaced our space greater than 300 feet apart or 600 feet apart. And I guess Dan and I are both trying to understand that a little bit better, how that's measured, what we could do to meet that, or if there's if we can, is there a modification provision in the PUD that allows for modifications from that? We didn't quite understand that standard, so that would be the first one. The other one would be on the street design, as Becky indicated. There's a reference on the bottom of page 2 for the more of a grid design that's, I guess, desired for this type of subdivision. So we'd look for a little direction on that. We're not sure if we're talking about eliminating the cul-de-sacs, maybe connecting the 2 cul-de-sacs. But again, we'd be open to hearing any comments on that. Perimeter buffers on that same page, just above it there on page 5, just some clarifications on what was the thought on perimeter buffering. We do have a large open space area along the west side that kind of buffers us from the western property line. Bachman's to the east, north property line abuts a kind of agricultural land, vacant. And then our property to the south, we abut about a dozen homes in Pheasant Hollow, which are single-family homes as well. So we're wondering what was the thought of buffering or setbacks there. And then last, I think we had one on, maybe that's it. Oh, then the stormwater on that same page, on page 5, there's just a reference to, there's a concern of stormwater in this area. So any information you guys have, we'd love to get what that concern is for stormwater management in this area of the city. So those are, I guess, our 4 questions off the top. So.
Okay. Any comment on that offhand, or shall we move on to commission comments?
Yeah, I would move on.
Okay.
If you have questions of me, I can certainly reference the zoning ordinance if you need me to, or expand. So however you want to do it.
Okay. All right, we'll open it up for questions for either developers or staff.
For the walking paths, would there be lighting through those, or would that just be just a path through the woods?
Yeah, the walking paths are intended to be natural, so we wouldn't install lighting in there. It'd be more for daytime walking. And they'd have connections to the sidewalks along the roads, and there's obviously wouldn't really encourage them for walking at night.
In the cul-de-sacs of Court C and D, is there enough room to turn a fire truck around in there?
We would design it, yes, to meet the city standard for cul-de-sacs, yeah.
I think, yeah, I understand what you're trying to accomplish with the reduced lot size and stuff, and in many ways, I think you comply with the spirit, but probably where we'll struggle the most will be along the south property line, where you are abutting existing homes on considerably larger lots, and the lots that you proposed along there are among your smaller ones.
What do you have to see on those? What your see a minimum, R1A minimum?
That would make things a lot easier.
I believe those lots to the south are 75 feet by 150 on average. So I think they meet the R1, even though they're part of a PUD, they're part of the planning and development there. I think those lots are 75 by 150, and I think ours are 65 primarily by 110. We could make them wider. We could, eliminate a lot or two on either side and distribute that land area to the remaining lots, if that would help, maybe get them closer to 75 feet, which would be the R1A width standard.
Yeah, most of those lots on the south side are 65-foot lots.
Correct.
Whereas the standard for R1 would be 75.
So go 1 through 12, go to 75.
Yeah,
We could do that.
well, that's one person's comment.
It would make a nicer transition there, I think.
Yeah. And I guess, again, speaking as one person and one person only, I don't have an issue with the cul-de-sacs. Yeah, I think a lot of people these days actually like living on a cul-de-sac as opposed to a through street.
I live on one too.
So do I. So, yeah, I don't know how the others feel, but to me, that's, yeah, yes, it's not consistent with what most of our community is, but, yeah, that doesn't mean that it's not, in my mind, an acceptable alternative, assuming that there are no public safety concerns. Yeah.
I will say the opposite. I strongly dislike cul-de-sacs. They make
That's why
it
we
a
sit
challenge
together.
for connect. Yeah, that's right. They're a pretty significant public service delivery challenge. And what ends up happening is the people who live on that stretch of road essentially get a publicly funded private street because it's not accessible really for use by the rest of the public. So that's why I would prefer that they weren't in this plan and there was a bit more connectivity.
I will only tell you that a lot of my bigger neighborhood walks down my cul-de-sac because they'd rather have a quiet street to walk on and ride bike on.
Well, with you as a
than-
neighbor, of course.
Well, yes.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yeah.
Our tone on the cul-de-sacs is, it's your city. I mean, we'll do what the planning commission kind of gives us direction to do.
Well, we've certainly given you clear direction. What can I say?
Both ways.
You know, I live in Allen of a neighborhood. We get so many complaints about cars speeding, about cars flying through the neighborhood. We don't get them from the cul-de-sac users. We don't, you know. So to your point, yeah, they're the most desirable sites. I understand from a public perspective, it causes friction. So our tone there is, you know, we're open-minded, kind of give us direction, we'll move ahead. But yeah, we propose our cul-de-sacs because they are a much better product for a lot of homeowners.
Love to have some consensus or some other feedback, because I'm 1-1 right now, so. Anybody else want?
Well, I don't have a problem with cul-de-sacs, if they're big enough so you can maintain them, and big enough so you can get a fire truck down there.
They're a 43-foot radius.
Yep.
And that's something we don't have the expertise on, well, Dave may, but yeah, I think it'll be particularly interesting to get the fire chief as well as the, you know, engineer.
If you
Thoughts on
wander
it?
down the end of, where is it, Charles Street. The east end of Charles Street has got a cul-de-sac on it. That's a pretty good sized cul-de-sac.
Those are really wide roads.
Yeah.
I guess I look at the other developments, like off Jefferson and Calgary, Briar Hill, like we have some other cul-de-sacs there on the north end of town. It just, to me, it feels like the type of development I would expect there versus straight grid.
I think Briar Hill, that's by Lutheran Church.
Yes.
I think that just dead ends.
Right, yes.
Yeah,
There
currently
isn't even a cul-de-sac there.
Well, to the west, there's that little
Yep,
one.
yep, that's the newest part of their newest development.
Yeah.
But they don't connect, they're not grid.
Right.
I think the Woodlawn Meadows PUD that was amended recently has 2 cul-de-sacs. It's a private street, but I think there's 2 cul-de-sacs on either end. But they're going to meet, and Excel Engineering is our end, did that plan, and they're doing ours, so if they haven't designed with the city standards, they will. But I'm pretty confident they're designed to the city standard.
Bill, any thoughts?
No, I don't have a problem with the cul-de-sacs as long as it meets the safety requirements for public service.
Yeah, same. I think that if we're building single-family housing, I think families, especially that have young kids, prefer to have those kinds of streets just because of the safety aspect of it.
Levi?
No issue with the cul-de-sac.
Okay, Scott?
No issue.
Okay. So, I think as long as, yeah.
Try.
You try, that's right. And,
She's just city
and we'll make,
manager.
yeah, so, yeah, your discussions with the fire chief and our public works engineer will, yeah, be significant to us, but
Of course, that's-
assuming that they don't
That's
raise
Sarah
questions.
right now, isn't it? Our public works engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real close.
Very powerful.
I think, yeah,
We have a contracted engineer who will review this.
good.
It won't be me. No, you don't want
So wasn't one of the big problems we had though, when we were talking the last time, was where we could put a water tower?
There will need to be a water tower constructed somewhere to have adequate water pressure to serve the site. It doesn't necessarily have to be on this site, but we don't own property in this area
Right.
currently. So that's,
Travis sent me a letter, an email for that property to the east, but the water tests showed adequate for the housing on the west. And have an email for that, too.
that's not my understanding, but we can check that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Travis asked me about if I would sell more property on the east side for a water tower. And we currently farm both sides of that. But my whole deal was thinking if we could get more housing, that's what seemed to be where it was needed the most. And there's plenty of places for rent, apartments, but a lot of people want houses, so that's why I did it myself, these guys. Try to put more houses, but there's some of their communities put up a lot of houses. And they fill them.
I think the comment on the drainage was in there because as we mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago, yeah, we know that area is pretty heavy clay. We've had drainage issues with some of the other developments up there, including one that you were involved in. And there's plenty of blame to go around for why that all happened.
That's why Dan's here, by the way.
And that's,
so.
we're not gonna resolve that tonight, but I think that we'll wanna make sure that we certainly don't repeat those, problems. So,
May I speak into that?
sure.
Our engineer, Excel Engineering, that's what they do. I mean, their stormwater is such a large part of their workflow. And so they've looked at this. The first thing, we gotta get it over to the engineer to size the basin. That's one of the first things they do is put the basin footprint based upon the site parameters. And so they place the basin, they size the basin to kind of meet all of the current design standards, stormwater design standards. A lot more work to do there, but in the work with the city's consulting engineer, make sure all the requirements are met.
Well, just be aware that we're going to be particularly sensitive to that because of the problems that exist up there with prior development, so.
And it's a concern of the public. There isn't a public hearing we have about development where stormwater concerns don't come up, so.
And I think they cited it, this is where the planner starts talking about engineering stuff, and Dan will stare at me if I say something wrong, but I think we located our stormwater basin in that northwest corner because there's already a natural drainage flow that flows to the north. So that's part of the reason for the location of the basin there. So.
Drainage problems aren't good for us either. We get a lot of customers that call on drainage issues, so we design it right properly in front of them. The issues are minimal, and the requirements and design standards and so forth.
So that property, if you're standing on your development on North Street, looking north, that field that you want to build on kind of tips towards the north, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's got a natural drainage that way.
Naturally.
Yeah. So it won't be draining to the south, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Well, you hope not. You put 121 houses in there, you might.
You can see the natural drainage on aerial photos. You can see it kind of going to the northwest. So.
Well, there's lakes back in there.
Yeah, a lot of water there.
Dan?
If I may make a comment just regarding especially the property on North Street currently, what staff has experienced is in these individual homes, at these individual basements, there were sump pumps put in, but for whatever reason, those sump pumps are running constantly in some of the homes, and then they have not been, the water coming out of those have not been directed in appropriate fashion. In several of those homes, there's been drainage tubes, pipes pumped out to the front of the house. It's emptying onto the grass, eroding some of that soil away onto the sidewalk, into the street, and in the wintertime especially, that water is solidifying icing on the road, creating traffic issues. So, you know, it's the macro stormwater management as well as the micro for each individual basement foundation that's going to be poured, is to make sure that there is going to be adequate sump pumps, adequate discharge of that onto the property, whether it be dry wells or, you know, I'm not an engineer, but so that's contained on site per the requirements.
Will most of these homes have basements?
Yeah, some basements, some pumps, and we can work with the city on the best, options for managing some pump. The flow from some pumps, a lot of times just daylighting it into a rear swale is pretty effective to minimize any impacts. The project to the south, Pheasant Hollow to me, and that was developed, 20-something years ago, I think, in relation to the multifamily complex down there. So we weren't involved in the mass grading, the storm design, kind of cradle to grave. This project, we're involved cradle to grave. We do it our way. Don't want issues. We want the sump pumps to be, optimized. We want the swales to drain the water within, a certain, reasonable amount of time. We don't want lakes and backyards. We don't want swales to turn into swamps. So, to your point, yeah, but it'll certainly be looked at.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up so that any design elements, macro, micro, are thought about so that it can be adequately managed. Of course.
Thank you, Dan. Other questions?
Mr. Chair, Rebecca, about the buffering, you look at their plans and it looks like they have little plants on the south and on the north side. Where is the buffering that you said there isn't on the plans?
Well, I was feeling it was along the north side of the property is, it's your low-density residential. So its existing use as a farm field is not the point. Right? You're never planning for that. What you're doing is what you're essentially doing is allowing for a very intense development in an area right next to your lowest density area. And of course, you're always assuming that land has the potential for being used for anything for which it's zoned. And which is why you, as a zoning approach, it's not unique to Hastings, but you generally seek to have the current developer provide the buffer to the adjacent, and you don't rely on the adjacent to have to buffer from the person creating the impacts, if you will. So now I understand your observation that while the south is where you have the larger lots, and so that's where, and it's developed residentially, and that's true. But I almost saw the opposite of it's to your north that is your low density residential. And they are, I don't know if, I looked at that and said I didn't see any vegetation. I don't know that any of that vegetation shown on there has any kind of accuracy to it. It's whether it's on the property or not, I don't know. The tree lines might be on the ag, I don't know. But it doesn't run the length of that anyway. And so, because your ordinance speaks to buffering and tending to perimeters, you know, my feeling was that both your north and south lines are, I think, are in question as to whether or not you feel that anything in addition to what is already being proposed is needed.
On the trees on the north and those were shot in by the surveyor. We just asked him to pick up anything of meaning.
There's a farm trend, yeah, there's a, what do you call it, a tree line there, Dan, it's just it's nothing that's, yeah, it's not, right.
The end of the city line, so there's not gonna be anything else to the north unless somebody decides to change the farm ground to the north of it.
Mr. Chair, if I may too, is
And we know
what
that.
we're used to is when we're buffering or screening, it's usually between unlike land uses. So single family is, I don't know if there's a lot of places in Hastings where you have buffering between single family land use and single family land use. I mean, even the Woodland Meadows amendment that was done here, I don't think there was any buffering along those single family lots that were recently approved. Nothing toward this property, nothing to the north, nothing to the west. So usually, my experience has been it's unlike land uses, incompatible land uses. Usually more intensive to less intensive are the ones doing the buffering, but that's my own personal experience.
Yeah. Okay. Other comments? Other questions?
Regarding the walking paths, the way I read that is looks more like it's designed for mid-block pathways to connect like the existing street and sidewalk network. Am I reading that right?
It is, which they do not provide. I was opting to use their open space walking paths in that they intersect with the road network at 4 locations. I chose to consider those in intent as mid-block walking paths. Now, it's a little hard when you have a development that doesn't have blocks, which you would get if you had a grid layout. But anyway, but I was just, so your ordinance says we want the mid-block paths because you're trying to get connectivity, and you want them in easements, and you want minimal separation. But that is up to the planning commission, because the way it says is where practicable. So, you know, I was looking at that and saying, well, you know, they're not really what was envisioned in the ordinance, but they connect with the road. They're ways to get from the public sidewalk to somewhere else. And so there are 4 of them. And if the planning commission, I think the planning commission just needs to provide direction on that to A, is that acceptable? Are you going to, do you want, you know, specific compliance with that section, or are you looking at that and saying, you know, honestly, that's fine? That's kind of up to you guys.
As one single person, as Dave said, I would like to see walking paths throughout the neighborhood. If it were me, it does make a neighborhood much more livable, pleasant to be in, even if it just means connecting the 2 cul-de-sacs to each other, or from the 2 cul-de-sacs over to the road on the left. It just makes a neighborhood more pleasant, and when you can walk, and you know, you want to get from I think you call it Court D to Court C, and you end up walking a mile to do it. So it's quite a ways. And it
Or
looks like
driving when you don't have a grid.
and it looks like it would be practical in that area.
I agree that some more connection between them would be nice. They wouldn't seem as separate, because they're relatively small by themselves. If it was more networked together in some way, if there was a little more of a destination, or that might be beneficial.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Just for clarity on the last comment, I guess, can you be maybe a little more specific on what you'd like to see so we know what to take back? Are you saying, for example, in the central open space, you'd like to see a path connection down to Court C and possibly to Street D to the north, so that you had multiple connections? And along Street E on the far west side, are we talking about maybe another connection somewhere in between where the street F goes to the west and.
Just for me,
Yeah,
if you put a sidewalk here and then maybe tee it off, just to make it so people that live out here have an opportunity to get back up into here and walk these trails. And people that live throughout the community can access the entire area without walking all the way around the 40-acre site to get to it.
the only negative to that is you have walkways in people's side yards or rear yards. That's the only negative part. So if you buy a lot, you have a walkway in your backyard.
For some people, that's a positive though.
Yeah.
If you have small kids and they can run from neighbor to neighbor and move on sidewalks instead of streets,
Well, just to clarify, there'll be sidewalks on both sides of all the streets internally. So it's just, one way or another, you'll be able to get out of your house, walk on the sidewalk, and get to one of these natural path, walking path locations. So
I think that's a good thing.
Yep.
All right.
I have one question
Chelsea?
about our setback requirements. What does the 18 feet / 7 feet mean versus 15 / 7.5?
Oh, the first number is total,
Okay.
and then the second number is the minimum
Individual
on the side. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And I remember I think it was in January when we were last discussing this, we talked about there being a homeowners association for this residential area. If in the case of like a winter storm or some sort of like natural disaster or something, not disaster, but issue, would the homeowners association be the ones paying for the upkeep of the trails, or would that be funded somewhere else?
So all the open space area would be governed by that association. That HOA would manage it, pay for improvements, upgrades, repairs, everything. And then every owner within the site condominium subdivision pays a small annual. I don't know if they do it monthly, but there's a fee that they collect to manage those areas.
Okay. Other questions, comments? All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate the work that you continue to do on this, and we're making progress. You're a glutton for punishment. You're all alone now.
It's interesting.
Good. All right, 2025 capital improvement plan. Dan?
Yeah, so in your packet is the 2025 capital improvement plan. Per the ordinance, I think I included that in there also, is the Planning Commission does, with the assistance of staff, prepare a capital improvement plan, reviews it, and then forwards that on to council. So the 2025 plan is in your packet for you to review and with your approval to pass it on to City Council.
Comments? Is there anything you want to say about it?
No, I think the primary reason why the Planning Commission reviews it is for consistency with the master plan and the goals
Yep.
that we've been discussing. There's not a ton of overlap in this particular CIP with some of the things that we've been talking about, with the exception of the Parks and Rec goals. Those are all taking place within existing parks. Most of this is improvement of existing facilities or changing some existing facilities rather than adding a new. A lot of the water and sewer department activities are going to occur in line with our street improvements as well. This isn't much in the way of anything new, rather it's replacing existing infrastructure and upgrading some things. When we do road improvements, you know, we do try to do them consistent with those underground infrastructure projects, so we're not having to dig twice or tear up anything that we've already done. We also review streets for how we can improve pedestrian crossing, how we can improve bicycle access or non-motorized access at the same time that we do a lot of those kinds of improvements. So beyond that, it's mostly equipment purchases, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just curious, of the 60 million, I assume we have to borrow some of that money?
Yes.
Know of any bankers?
So we need a motion
We need a motion to recommend approval to
I'll make the
the
motion.
city council. We have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Moved and supported. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. All right. Glad it's them, not us, that has to figure out how they're gonna pay for it. All right, old business, JPA, JPC update. I don't think we have anything to report, do we?
No, it's a holiday last month, so.
Yes. Work task list, Dan?
Yeah, so item 1 on the list, actually the Housing Committee of the Planning Commission is taking that under advisement currently. So that is being reviewed currently by the Housing Committee. Other than that, number 2, obviously you've acted on that tonight and forwarded that to City Council. Let me see. 3, the gap analysis for the master plan. Review the zoning map. That's also under consideration by the Housing Committee too, prior to coming back to the Planning Commission. And then recently the Housing Committee also started the discussion on multifamily dwelling in the current text. So other than that.
Okay. Any questions for Dan? All right, thank you, Dan. The tracking report?
Tracking report, no change from prior month.
Any issues with any of the ones that continue to show up there?
Let's see. The maintenance building at Meadowstone, I have not driven by there recently. I know that there was activity at the PCI level later in the summer. I'm not sure if they started construction on that yet or not, but there's activity. EWB, that's the Hastings Pharmacy building. The monument sign is still in place. I've been in communication with the owner several times about the removal of that, so I will continue my reminder of him that needs to be removed.
Well, particularly in as much as he's using the new building mounted sign. Now, he has signs in all compartments of that stacked sign, so it's time to, including the pharmacy, so it's time for the island sign to go.
I agree. Central Dispatch, I believe that is close to being wrapped up. I can check with our chief of police to see where they're at with that. So that may be something that we'll be able to remove.
If it's not done, it's very close based on the last report we had at the county.
Okay. So it is very close. 420 East Mill, that's the project across the street. There is obviously some activity there with equipment. Meadowstone Apartments, I know the form systems were delivered last week for the first 3 buildings, so they're starting to go vertical from what I understand. Chad Stora, actually, site clearing continues. I know the stormwater retention basin, I believe, is all in place and the appropriate easement has been signed. Zach Santemeyer, that's the former county seat building. They're continuing to work on that. And then the Woodlawn Meadows Retirement Village, that 32 parcels, they're still gathering some preliminary estimates for that project.
Okay, any questions for Dan? If not, we'll move on to item D, which is a discussion on the 3 to 4 family overlay district, which is the most recent project that the Housing Committee has been dealing with. So, Dan?
Yeah, so the Planning Commission was given this information last month. I don't know if there's any comments, any questions specifically to this draft of the 3 to 4 family overlay district. If you have any questions after reviewing the staff memo that Rebecca's put together, or any other specific questions, the reason I ask is if there's not, or if there's questions that we can answer as staff, and there's no other major concerns, what staff would like to be able to do is to put together a draft ordinance to present to the Planning Commission for their review and consideration of establishing a public hearing.
I really do want to thank the committee for, there's a lot of work that's been put into this. We're trying to protect the character of our residential neighborhoods. At the same time, we realize that we've got a fair number of structures out there that are currently non-conforming uses that to some degree, if we can bring some of those into conformity, I think that's a general win for the community, because that means the owners have more of an opportunity to repair, replace, upgrade than what they do as long as it's non-conforming. But we also recognize that while there are a number of other properties that could be converted to 3 or 4 family, that we don't want to get carried away with that, and that's why we propose some of the limitations that are in there that will assure that we don't totally change the character of some of our older neighborhoods. So any thoughts you have, we'd love to hear it, but
I just had one question that I don't know if you really answered it last time, Rebecca. When we're doing the block counting for density, if there's a single-family home in that block that has an ADU, does the ADU get counted as a separate residence when you're looking at density?
Yes, it would.
It would?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
so if it's a single-family home with an ADU, it's a 2-unit.
Two
right.
units, okay.
Yes.
That's all I needed.
Okay. Other questions or comments? All right, we'll keep moving that forward then. Thank you. You're, I'm assuming by the silence, I'm going to draw a conclusion that we're generally okay with the direction that we've taken on this, and that you'd like to see us formalize the language and bring it back for consideration.
I don't have any issue at all with it.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you. We will do that. All right, open public discussion and comment. Julie, back to you.
Nothing.
Okay, thank you for being here. Staff comments.
Nothing for me.
Commissioner comments. Mr. Mayor?
No comment. I think things went pretty well tonight.
And we'd welcome any thoughts you have. We appreciate your participation tonight. It is very good to have you here.
It's awesome to be here. Thank you for
Good.
having me.
Chelsea?
I will just say I'm looking forward to next month. We'll have the largest gravel road race in the world in Hastings. So.
Yeah.
You racing again?
Nope, just selling beer.
I don't know, John was talking at Kiwanis last week. He sounded like he might be talked into it if he gets back in town in time.
Still got the suit, don't you?
He broke 2 ribs last week, so I don't think he will.
Geez. Okay, well, that probably rules that out then. Bill?
Nothing.
Nicole?
Thank you to the city for participating. You had a couple different departments that participated in the Berry County Career Fest, so thank you for that. That was on Friday. And the feedback that we got from the students that participated has been really, really positive, so thank you.
Sarah? Levi?
Nothing today.
Scott?
Nope.
All right. We're down to that point. Would somebody care to make a motion that we
Motion,
adjourn?
we adjourn.
I'll support.
Moved and supported. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.